Hi, my name is Jerry Viola,
I'm June Park.
and we are the
Econ Bros. Yeah. On this episode of Econ Bros,
We're going to be talking about the 7 economic principles. What we're going to do today on this episode is we're going to explain all 7 economic principles and show how they affect everyday life and the economy. So the first principle that we're going to talk about is scarcity force trade-off. June, what is scarcity force trade-off?
it's limited resources, force people to make decisions, and face trade-offs when they choose. There is no such a thing as free lunch.
So what is the trade-off? So the trade-off is the exchange of one benefit or advantage of another that is thought to be better. These are all the alternatives that you give making a choice. So every choice has a trade-off. All right. So an example of this principle would be something like these vans and Nike. This vans and a Nike. So let's say this van looks better, and it feels better, but it's more expensive. This shoe feels better, but it may not look as good, or it's a lot more, but it is a lot less expensive. So say we trade these. I would be taking these Nikes because of how comfortable they are, but in exchange for that, I'm sacrificing the looks and maybe the cost. All right, so the second principle that we're going to talk about is cost versus benefit. June, what is cost versus benefit?
Versus benefit is when people choose something that the benefits are greater than the cost.
So an example of this would be studying over the summer or working over the summer. Here you're looking at June studying for the SAT instead of working over the summer. June risks not getting any money over the summer, but he is getting ready for the SAT, which he'll probably get a better score on. Right now you're looking at Jay working over the summer. He's making a lot of money, but he's not taking any time to study for the SAT. Because June decided to study for the SAT instead of working over the summer, he ended up really broke. But he risked that, and he took that risk because he thought that studying the SAT would be more worth it than working. And now because Jay decided to work over the summer, he didn't study for crap during the SAT, and he failed and he didn't get to any of the colleges he wanted to, but he does have a lot of money.
So the third principle that we're going to talk about is thinking at the margin. What is thinking at the margin? So thinking at the margin is when most decisions involve choices that involve a little bit more or a little bit less of something. And what is the benefit of adding one more? You get a little bit more of everything, and the return isn't that bad. Yo, dude, this is some pretty cool torpedoes. How much for them?
Oh, it's $2 for one, but if you buy one, you get another one for half.
Buy one, get one half off?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
What you just saw in this video was an example of thinking at the margin. It is when something is a little bit more or something a little less. Jay saw that the torpedoes were buy one, get one half off, so he got one more because it couldn't hurt that much more.
All right, Jay, what's the next principle?
What's the next principle? Dude, it's that incentives matter. Incentives matter is when people respond to incentives in a generally predictable ways. So it's the question that you're asking is why do people do what they do?
Okay.
An example of this would be, you know what? Why don't we just show you?
There's no way I'm jumping off that cliff.
Dude, you're not gonna jump off the cliff?
All
right, hear me out. You jump off that cliff, I'll buy you lunch for like the rest of the year.
What you just saw here was an example of how incentives matter. June didn't want to jump off the cliff, but Jay's incentives was that he was going to buy June lunch for the rest of the year. This drove June to a very predictable decision, knowing that he would jump off the cliff. In doing so, in exchange, he got the incentives, which is that he would get lunch for the rest of the year.
All right, hurry up.
June, what is trade? Like, why do we always talk about it? What makes it so important?
Because trades make people better off, that's the fifth principle.
That's the fifth principle?
Yep.
Trade makes people better off?
Yep.
I wonder how that works.
Me too.
June, how does trade make people better off?
By focusing on what we do well and by trading with others, we end up with more and better choices.
That's pretty good, June.
Okay.
Oh. I'm the CEO of a shirt company.
I'm the CEO of suit company.
My clients want some suits.
Oh, my clients want shirts.
Maybe if we trade with each other and do business with each other, our clients will be better off and more happy.
I think that sounds good. Very good.
What you just saw here was an example of how trade makes people better off. Jay owned a shirt company and June owned a shoe company. If they do business with each other and traded, then both of their clients would be better off because both of what they need complements each other.
So June, what about the individual freedoms within the market?
That would be market coordinate trade.
So in market coordinate trade, there are two parts, the market and the invisible hand.
Can you see my thigh?
So June, can you explain the market side of things?
Oh, it's any arrangement that brings together buyers and sellers to do the business.
Okay. Dude, like, I always need my supplies on demand, and I don't really want to go out to get them.
You got Amazon.
Well, I also need cups of coffee in the morning.
You also got Starbucks.
What about agriculture during the winter and spring times when California can't provide them? Where do we get them from then?
We get it from Mexico. That's what we do.
Oh, so that's how market coordinate trade works.
Yes, sir.
So what you saw here was an example of market coordinate trade. As you saw here, Jay needed a lot of things. There are a lot of places that could offer those things, such as the Starbucks for Jay's coffee, Mexico for agriculture during the winter. And this is how the invisible hand works, and it's where you need the marketplace that could usually be filled with business owners that are incentivized to provide that need for profit.
All right, June, what is the seventh principle we need to talk about today?
It is future consequences count.
What is future consequences count?
It is choices and decisions made often have longer term effects and should be considered. Decisions made today often have consequences in the future.
I mean, really, many only look at the immediate effects, but you also need to consider the long-term effects. Consequences count, you need to watch out for unintended consequences, like effects and choices and laws that could have a consequence that are unaffected or unintended.
Alright, so an example of future consequence counts is if I beat up June. If I beat up June, it might feel right at first because he pissed me off, but in the long run, I might get arrested or incarcerated and sent to prison for a really long time, and it might not be that worth it. So that would be an example of future consequence counts. Okay, so for the eighth principle, I need to explain on my own because June got really sick after being in the pool, and it was like 60 degrees, and he's not feeling well, and neither is Carl. So I'm going to say the eighth principle on my own. So the eighth principle that we need to talk about is how government can sometimes improve market outcomes. Now, they can do this in a lot of ways, such as lack of competition, externalities, but I think the most important one is by protecting property rights. I think stimuluses are more of just a personal thing and it doesn't really affect market outcomes. I think it does a little bit, but I think the main one would be probably protecting property rights, because without property rights, marketplaces and the market itself can't protect itself, and they would need the government to help them with that, and that's just kind of a law thing. So the example that I said was protecting property rights. Let's put into an example something like Starbucks or Costco. If there weren't any property rights, Starbucks and Costco would have to struggle with keeping their businesses up, keeping the real estate up. And by protecting property rights, they can keep their business running via law and via the government. So that is how the government can improve market outcomes, because companies like that can really improve the market outcomes by themselves, and the government can protect that. And for the last economic principle, it is that individual and national standards of living depend on the ability to produce goods and services. And it can do this by increased education and technology. Obviously, technology, there's a lot of robots that make things nowadays, but I also think that education is a really important part of that. When students have, or when people have higher education, then they can get a lot more jobs to produce those goods and services for the people. And with that, that concludes this episode of Econ Bros. Obviously, two of the bros are not here. Carl is down with some kind of fever, and June is out from being in the pool yesterday, and he does not feel good at all. So it's just me. I wish they were here to say goodbye to you, but I just want to say thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for watching the Econ Bros.